The glass didn't slip. Vanessa Cole smiled and slowly tipped the soda over Marcus Reed's shoulder, right there under the golden lights of a rooftop lounge where deals were worth more than most people's homes. Ice hit the marble. Conversations paused. Nobody stepped in. Marcus didn't flinch. He didn't raise his voice, didn't argue. He just reached for a napkin, wiped his sleeve, and stood there. Calm, steady, like none of it could touch him. Around him, people looked away. Some stared into their drinks. Others pretended not to notice. Because in a room like that, silence is easier than choosing a side. But one man didn't look away, and he noticed something no one else did. A worn ring on Marcus's hand, catching the light for just a second. Not flashy, not expensive looking, but wrong for a man everyone thought didn't belong there. Vanessa thought she had just humiliated another invisible employee. She was wrong, because within minutes, that same room would realize they hadn't been looking at a nobody. They had been looking at the one person they should have feared crossing. The rooftop lounge sat high above downtown Chicago, wrapped in glass and glowing like a jewel against the night sky. Inside, warm golden lights spilled across polished marble floors, catching the shine of expensive watches and the deep tones of tailored suits. A jazz trio played softly near the bar, their music blending with the low hum of conversations about investments, mergers, and quiet deals that moved more money than most people would see in a lifetime. Marcus Reed moved through it all like a shadow. He carried a tray of drinks with steady hands, weaving between tables without brushing a single chair. His uniform was clean but worn at the edges, the kind of wear that didn't come from carelessness but from time. His posture was straight, his movements precise, his presence calm in a room that barely noticed him, or chose not to. At the center of the room stood Vanessa Cole. Her heels clicked sharply against the marble as she moved from one VIP table to another, her smile polished, her voice bright and practiced. She knew how to own a room like this. 6 years in high-end hospitality had taught her exactly where to stand, how to laugh, and who mattered, and more importantly, who didn't. She spotted Marcus before he saw her. "Hey," she called, loud enough to turn a few heads. "You're moving a little slow tonight, aren't you?" Marcus stopped beside a table, setting down a glass of bourbon in front of a guest. "Apologies, ma'am," he said quietly. "Just making sure everything's right." Vanessa stepped closer, her smile tightening at the corners. "Everything's right?" she repeated, as if the words themselves amused her. She glanced at the nearby guests, then back at Marcus. "You think people come up here for right? They come up here for perfect." A few guests chuckled softly, not because it was funny, but because laughter was easier than silence. Marcus met her gaze for a brief moment. Not defiant, not submissive, just steady. "I understand," he said. Something about that calm seemed to irritate her more. Vanessa picked up a glass of soda from a passing tray, swirling the ice lazily as she looked him up and down. "You know," she said, lowering her voice just enough to sound intimate but still loud enough for the table beside them to hear, "sometimes I wonder how this place even hires people who don't fit the brand." The words hung in the air, thin and sharp. Marcus didn't answer. Across the room, a man in a charcoal suit, Ethan Blake, shifted slightly in his seat. His conversation had paused without him realizing it. His eyes drifted toward the scene unfolding near the center of the lounge. Vanessa tilted her head, studying Marcus like a problem she had already decided wasn't worth solving. "You ever look around in here?" she continued. "See the difference between you and everyone else?" Still, Marcus said nothing. The jazz music carried on. Glasses clinked. Somewhere near the bar, Someone laughed too loudly. But around them, a small circle of attention had formed, quiet and expectant. Vanessa smiled, and then, without warning, she tipped the glass. Cold soda spilled over Marcus's shoulder, darkening the fabric of his uniform as it ran down his back. Ice cubes clattered against the floor, skidding across marble in sharp, echoing taps. For a second, no one breathed. The golden light didn't change. The music didn't stop. But something in the room shifted, subtle and heavy, like a curtain dropping over everything. Marcus stood still, the liquid soaked through his shirt, clinging to his skin. A drop slid from his sleeve and fell onto the floor. He didn't flinch, he didn't raise his voice. He didn't look at the guests. He simply reached for a napkin from a nearby table and pressed it lightly against his arm. Vanessa laughed. "Oops," she said, though there was nothing accidental in her tone. "Now you match the mess you bring into the room." A few people looked down at their glasses. Others stared straight ahead, pretending not to notice. No one stepped forward. No one spoke. Ethan's fingers tightened slightly around the stem of his glass. He watched Marcus carefully now. Really watched him. There was something off about the picture. Not the uniform, not the spill. Something deeper. Something that didn't fit. Marcus lowered the napkin and placed it neatly back on the table. "I'll get that cleaned up," he said quietly. No anger, no embarrassment in his voice. Just a simple statement, as if he were talking about a spilled drink and nothing more. Vanessa shook her head, still smiling. "Yeah," she said, "you should." She turned away before he could respond, already scanning the room for her next conversation, her next impression, her next opportunity to be seen. And just like that, it was over. Or at least, it should have been. Marcus bent down, picking up the scattered ice cubes one by one. The cold seeped into his fingers, but his movements stayed steady, unhurried. When he stood again, the damp fabric of his shirt clung slightly to his back, catching the light in darker patches. He didn't rush. He didn't retreat. He simply walked toward the service corridor, disappearing behind a narrow door near the bar. The music swelled slightly, as if to fill the space he left behind. Around the room, conversations slowly resumed. Deals were discussed again. Laughter returned, softer this time, more careful. But not everyone moved on. Ethan Blake remained still. His gaze followed the direction Marcus had gone, lingering on the closed service door. Something about the man didn't sit right with him. It wasn't just the way he handled the moment. It was the way he carried himself before it even happened. Then Ethan noticed it. Just before Marcus disappeared, the sleeve of his wet shirt had shifted slightly, revealing his hand more clearly under the light. And there on his finger was a ring, old, worn, not flashy, but engraved with a symbol Ethan recognized instantly, a mark he had only ever seen in boardrooms, printed on documents worth millions, etched into the identity of a company that didn't make mistakes. Ethan leaned back slowly in his chair. His conversation partner was talking again, but he didn't hear a word. His eyes stayed fixed on that door. Because now, one question pushed through everything else in his mind. What was a man like that doing here? And why did it feel like everyone in this room had just made a mistake they didn't even realize yet? Ethan Blake set his glass down without taking a sip. Around him, the lounge slowly returned to its polished rhythm. Conversations restarted in low, controlled tones. A woman laughed too brightly at something her companion said. A waiter passed with a tray of champagne flutes, the soft clink of glass barely covering the tension that still lingered like smoke in the air. But Ethan couldn't shake what he'd seen. The spill, the silence, and more than anything, the ring. He leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping once against the table before going still. He had spent the better part of 20 years moving through rooms like this. Private equity meetings, closed-door negotiations, late-night deals where the air felt heavier than the numbers on the page. He knew power when he saw it, and Marcus Reed didn't move like a man without it. Across the room, Vanessa Cole had already pivoted back into her element. She stood beside a table of investors, her smile smooth, her posture confident, her earlier behavior erased as if it had never happened. "Gentlemen," she was saying, "we pride ourselves on creating an atmosphere where everything feels effortless. That's what luxury is, when you don't have to think about anything." One of the men nodded approvingly. Another lifted his drink. Effortless. Ethan almost laughed. His gaze drifted again to the service door Marcus had disappeared through. It remained closed, plain and unremarkable, tucked between a mirrored column and the bar. Most people wouldn't look at it twice, but Ethan kept looking. Something wasn't adding up. He turned slightly in his chair, angling himself so he could see both the door and the rest of the room. He wasn't the only one who had noticed the incident. But he might be the only one still thinking about it. A woman seated across from him leaned forward. "Ethan, are you even listening?" He blinked, pulling his attention back. "Sorry," he said. "Just long day." She smiled politely, but her eyes flicked toward the center of the room, where Vanessa's voice carried lightly over the music. "That manager's something else," she murmured. "Bit much, don't you think?" Ethan didn't answer right away. "Yeah," he said finally. "Something like that." But his mind wasn't on Vanessa anymore. It was on Marcus. Behind the service door, the atmosphere changed completely. The golden glow of the lounge gave way to harsh fluorescent lighting. The air smelled faintly of detergent and metal. The hum of refrigeration units replaced the soft jazz, and the quiet efficiency of the back-of-house staff moved at a different rhythm, faster, sharper, less forgiving. Marcus stepped inside without hesitation. A few heads turned when they saw the dark stain across his back. But no one said anything. Not because they didn't care, but because in places like this, silence was part of survival. He walked to a small locker area near the far wall and opened one of the metal doors. Inside hung a spare shirt, neatly pressed despite its age. He removed the damp one with careful movements, folding it instead of tossing it aside. Even now he didn't rush. Lena appeared a few steps behind him, her face tight with concern. "Marcus," she whispered. "You okay?" He pulled the clean shirt over his shoulders, buttoning it calmly. "I'm fine," he said. "That wasn't okay," she insisted, her voice low but urgent. She can't treat you like that." Marcus finished fastening the last button before turning to her. "I've seen worse," he said quietly. Lena shook her head. "That doesn't make it right." "No," Marcus agreed. "It doesn't." For a moment, it seemed like he might say more. But instead, he reached into his locker and took out a small cloth, wiping his hands slowly, as if grounding himself in the motion. Lena watched him, frustration and helplessness mixing in her expression. "You could report it," she said. "Go to HR or—" "And say what?" Marcus interrupted gently. "That a manager embarrassed me in front of guests? She humiliated you." He met her eyes, not defensive, not dismissive, just steady. "And what do you think happens next?" Lena didn't answer. They both knew. A complaint would be filed, maybe reviewed, maybe not. Weeks would pass, The story would blur, and in the meantime, the person who spoke up would be watched more closely than the person who caused the problem. Marcus folded the cloth and placed it back inside his locker. "Let it go," he said softly. Lena's jaw tightened. "I can't just pretend like I didn't see that." "You don't have to pretend," Marcus replied. "Just don't let it cost you more than it's worth." There was no bitterness in his voice, no anger. That, more than anything, unsettled her. "How are you so calm?" she asked. Marcus paused. For the first time, something flickered behind his eyes, something deeper, older than the moment they were standing in. "You learn," he said. "After a while, you learn what deserves your energy and what doesn't." Before Lena could respond, a voice called from across the room. "Reed!" They both turned. A supervisor stood near the kitchen entrance, clipboard in hand, already looking impatient. "We're short on the floor. Get back out there." Marcus nodded once. "Coming." Lena grabbed his arm lightly as he moved past her. "Marcus," he stopped. "You don't have to take this," she said. He gave her a small, almost invisible smile. "I'm not taking anything," he said. "I'm just doing my job." Then he stepped away. Back in the lounge, the music had shifted into something slower, smoother. The skyline beyond the glass walls shimmered with distant lights, cars moving like threads of white and red through the city below. Ethan noticed the door open. Marcus emerged, now in a clean shirt, indistinguishable at first glance from any other staff member moving through the room. Except he wasn't. Ethan watched as Marcus picked up a tray, adjusted its balance, and stepped back into the flow of the evening as if nothing had happened. No hesitation, no sign of resentment, just quiet, precise movement. A man who had been publicly humiliated less than 10 minutes ago and carried himself like it hadn't touched him. That wasn't normal. Ethan leaned forward slightly, studying him more closely now. Marcus approached a table near the windows, placing drinks with careful attention, making sure each glass was positioned exactly where it needed to be. One of the guests barely looked at him. Another waved him away without a word. Marcus nodded once and moved on, invisible again. But not to Ethan. His gaze dropped, searching for the detail he had noticed before. There. As Marcus reached to steady a tray, the sleeve of his shirt shifted just enough. The ring caught the light. Subtle, unpolished, but unmistakable. Ethan's breath slowed. He had seen that mark before, not often, not publicly, but enough to recognize it instantly. It wasn't just a logo. It was a signature, a symbol tied to a company that didn't advertise itself the way others did. A company that moved quietly, strategically, one that owned pieces of things without needing its name on the front. A company whose leadership rarely showed up in rooms like this unless something mattered. Ethan sat back again, his mind racing now. He looked at Marcus, then at Vanessa, laughing at another table, completely unaware. Then back at Marcus, and a single thought settled in, heavy and certain. Something was about to shift. He didn't know how, he didn't know when, but he knew this. Whatever Vanessa thought she had just done, it wasn't over. Not even close. The night stretched on, but something in the air had shifted, subtle, almost invisible, like pressure building before a storm. Marcus Reed moved through the lounge with the same quiet precision, but now every step seemed to carry a weight that wasn't there before. The new shirt clung clean against his shoulders, the earlier incident erased on the surface. If anyone had just walked in, they would never know what had happened. And that was the point. The room had already decided to forget. At a corner table near the windows, a group of executives laughed over something trivial. One of them snapped his fingers lightly, barely glancing up. Marcus was already there before the sound finished echoing. "Yes, sir," he said. "Another round," the man replied. Waving his empty glass, Marcus nodded and took the glass without a word. As he turned, one of the men leaned back in his chair, watching him go. "Man," he muttered under his breath, "these places always got people like that running around." The others chuckled. Not loud, not proud, just enough. Marcus kept walking. In the service corridor, the lighting buzzed faintly overhead. Stainless steel counters reflected sharp white lines. The air was cooler here, stripped of the warmth and illusion of the lounge. Marcus set the tray down and began preparing the next round of drinks, his movements automatic. Ice, pour, garnish, repeat. The rhythm grounded him. But his mind didn't stay in the moment. It drifted, back to a different kind of night. Cold air leaking through the cracked window of a car that barely started. A blanket folded twice to fight off the chill. A younger version of himself sitting behind the wheel, staring out at a parking lot lit by flickering street lamps. He could still feel it, the ache in his chest, the silence that came after another door had closed. "You're not the right fit." That's what they always said. Didn't matter how early he showed up. Didn't matter how hard he worked. It was never about the work. Marcus blinked, bringing himself back. The glass in his hand was full. He set it down carefully. "Marcus." He turned. Lena stood near the doorway again, her arms crossed tightly, her voice lower now, more cautious. "You shouldn't be back out there," she said. "Not after what happened." Marcus wiped his hands on a towel. "They need the staff," he said simply. "That's not what I meant." He looked at her. "I know," he said. Lena stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "She's watching you." Marcus glanced past her toward the lounge. Through the narrow opening, Vanessa could be seen across the room, speaking with a group of guests. Her body language was relaxed, confident, in control. "She watches everybody," Marcus replied. "Not like that," Lena said. "Not the same way." Marcus didn't argue, because she was right. Back in the lounge, Vanessa's eyes tracked him the moment he stepped through the door. There was something about him that irritated her. It wasn't just his presence. It was his lack of reaction, the way he didn't shrink, didn't apologize beyond what was necessary, didn't seem affected. People like him were supposed to know their place and stay in it. She turned to the guest she was speaking with, finishing her sentence with a practiced smile before excusing herself. Her heels cut across the floor again, each step deliberate. "Marcus," she called. He stopped. "Yes, ma'am." She looked him up and down, her expression cool. "I thought I told you to clean yourself up." "I did." She stepped closer, inspecting him like she was searching for something wrong. "Well," she said slowly, "next time, try not to make a scene in the first place." Marcus held her gaze. "I wasn't aware I had," he replied. The words were calm, neutral, but something in them sharpened the air. Vanessa's smile thinned. "You know," she said, lowering her voice, "attitude like that doesn't last long in places like this." Marcus didn't respond, because he had heard it before. Different voices, same message. Vanessa leaned in slightly. "People get replaced every day," she continued, "especially the ones who forget how things work." A pause. Then Marcus spoke just as quietly. "I haven't forgotten," he said. For a brief second, something flickered in her expression. Uncertainty, maybe. or annoyance at not getting the reaction she wanted. Either way, it passed quickly. "Good," she said, straightening, "because I'm moving you off the floor." Marcus didn't blink. "You'll be handling cleanup in the back for the rest of the night," she added. "We don't need any more distractions out here." Around them, conversations slowed again. Not enough for it to be obvious, just enough for people to listen without looking. Marcus nodded once, understood. No argument, no protest. Vanessa gave a satisfied nod and turned away, already done with the conversation. And just like that, he was dismissed. Marcus walked back toward the service door. The music faded behind him. The warmth of the lounge disappeared. The quiet hum of the back of house took over again. But this time the space felt smaller, tighter, as if the walls had shifted closer without moving at all. He stepped into the corridor and let the door close behind him. The sound clicked softly. Final. From his table, Ethan watched the entire exchange. Every word, every movement. He didn't miss the way Marcus stood, the way he responded, the way he didn't. And he didn't miss the way Vanessa looked at him. Not as a person, as a problem. Ethan leaned back, exhaling slowly. He had seen power used like that before. Not loud, not obvious, but deliberate. And he had seen what happened when it went unchecked. His eyes drifted once more to Marcus's hand as he disappeared through the door. That ring, that symbol, it didn't belong to a man scrubbing trays in the back. Ethan reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. He hesitated for a moment. Then he unlocked it. His thumb hovered over a contact he hadn't called in months. A name tied to boardrooms, acquisitions, and decisions that reshaped entire companies. He glanced up once more at the door Marcus had gone through, then back at the phone. Something about this night didn't feel accidental anymore. It felt arranged, or maybe revealed. Either way, Ethan knew one thing for certain. Whatever was happening here, it was bigger than a spilled drink, and it wasn't going to stay hidden much longer. The back hallway felt narrower than before. Marcus Reed stepped deeper into the service area, past the hum of refrigerators and the clang of dishes being stacked for the next round. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a pale glow that flattened everything, faces, shadows, even time itself. Someone had left a mop bucket in the middle of the corridor. The water inside it was cloudy, gray from the night's work. Marcus moved it aside without thinking, adjusting it neatly against the wall so no one would trip. Even here, even now, he fixed what didn't need to be fixed. A prep cook rushed past him, muttering something about orders running late. Another server brushed by without making eye contact. Everyone was moving fast, focused on their own responsibilities, their own survival. Marcus kept walking until he reached the small storage room at the end of the hall. The door creaked slightly as he pushed it open. Inside, the air was cooler, quieter. Shelves lined the walls, stacked with supplies, napkins, cleaning products, spare utensils. A single metal chair sat in the corner, unused, like it had been forgotten. Marcus stepped in and closed the door halfway behind him. For a moment, he just stood there. Not slumped, not defeated, just still. He rolled his shoulders once, loosening the tension that had settled there. His hand drifted briefly to his chest, fingers brushing against the chain hidden beneath his shirt. The outline of the ring pressed faintly against the fabric. A quiet reminder. Then the door opened again. "Marcus!" Lina stepped inside, her breath slightly uneven, as if she had walked faster than she meant to. "I told you not to come back here," he said gently. I wasn't asking, she replied. She shut the door behind her, lowering her voice instinctively, even though no one else was around. They moved you off the floor? She asked. Marcus nodded. For the rest of the night. Lena let out a small, frustrated breath. That's not right. No, Marcus said. It isn't. But you're just going to accept it? Marcus looked at her. I'm going to do what I came here to do, he said. She frowned. And what exactly is that? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked over to the shelf, picking up a box of folded napkins and adjusting its position slightly, aligning it with the edge like it mattered. I'm working, he said finally. That's not what I mean, Lena pressed. You're better than this. Anyone can see that. Marcus's expression didn't change. Better than what? He asked quietly. This, she said, gesturing around the small room. The way they treat you. The way she treats you. He considered her words for a moment. Then he shook his head, just slightly. You don't measure yourself by how people treat you, he said. You measure yourself by how you carry it. Lena stared at him. That sounds nice, she said. But it doesn't fix anything. No, Marcus agreed. It doesn't. A pause. But it keeps you from becoming something you're not. The room fell quiet. Lena leaned back against the wall, folding her arms. I don't know how you do that, she admitted. I would have walked out already. Marcus allowed himself a faint smile. I've walked out before, he said. When? A long time ago. Something in his tone made her stop asking. Instead, she looked at him more closely. Really looked this time. Not as a coworker, not as just another employee, but as a person carrying something deeper than what showed on the surface. You're not like the others here, she said. Marcus didn't respond. You don't move like them. You don't talk like them. You don't... She hesitated, searching for the right words. You don't seem like you belong here. Marcus met her eyes. Maybe I don't, he said, but you're still here. He nodded once. For now. Before she could ask what that meant, a loud crash echoed from the hallway outside. Metal hitting tile followed by a sharp intake of breath. Both of them turned toward the door. Marcus opened it first. In the corridor, an older woman stood frozen near the service entrance, her hands trembling slightly. A tray lay on the ground at her feet, glasses shattered across the floor, water spreading in thin streams toward the drain. She looked like she didn't belong in this part of the building, well-dressed, but not in the polished, expensive way of the guests upstairs. More like someone who had dressed carefully for an evening out. Someone who wasn't used to navigating spaces like this. I'm so sorry, she said quickly, her voice shaking. I didn't realize. Someone told me this was the way to the restrooms. A young staff member stood a few feet away, clearly unsure what to do, glancing nervously down the hall. It's fine, Marcus said, already stepping forward. He knelt without hesitation, picking up the larger pieces of glass carefully, his movements calm and deliberate. You didn't do anything wrong, he added. This hallway's not marked well. The woman let out a small breath, relief mixing with embarrassment. I should have been more careful. Marcus shook his head. No, ma'am, he said. This one's on us. Lena grabbed a mop from nearby and started cleaning the spill. The younger staff member relaxed slightly, stepping back as Marcus handled the situation with quiet authority. The woman watched him for a moment. Then her eyes drifted to his hand, to the ring. Her expression changed, subtly, but enough. Recognition. Not full understanding, not yet, but something sparked. You, she began, then stopped herself. Marcus looked up at her, waiting. She hesitated, then smiled politely, shaking her head. Nothing, thank you, she said instead. He nodded and returned to his work. Within minutes, the mess was cleared. The hallway looked as if nothing had happened. The woman straightened her jacket, still watching him. Do you work here long? She asked. Long enough, Marcus replied. She studied him for another second, then gave a small nod. Well, she said, they're lucky to have you. Marcus didn't answer, because he wasn't sure that was true. She walked back toward the main corridor, her footsteps fading as she rejoined the world of soft music and golden light. Lena stood beside Marcus, mop still in her hands. You see that? She whispered. See what? The way she looked at you. Marcus didn't look up. People look at all kinds of things, he said. Not like that, Lena insisted. She recognized something. Marcus finally stood, wiping his hands on a clean towel. Maybe, he said. And you're just going to ignore it? He paused. Then he folded the towel neatly and set it aside. I'm not ignoring anything, he said. I'm just waiting. For what? Marcus glanced toward the hallway leading back to the lounge. The music drifted faintly through the walls, the sound of laughter, glasses, conversations layered over one another. All of it felt distant now. For people to show you who they really are, he said. Lena frowned. And then what? Marcus's gaze remained steady. Then you decide what to do with it. Back in the lounge, Ethan Blake watched the service door again. He hadn't made the call yet, but his phone was still in his hand. And the longer the night went on, the more certain he became that whatever he was seeing, it wasn't accidental. It was something unfolding. And when it did, it was going to change everything in that room. But for now, nothing changed. That was the hardest part. The lounge above continued as if the moment had never happened. The golden light still shimmered against the glass walls. The city stretched out beneath it, alive and indifferent, headlights weaving through the streets like veins carrying motion through the night. Inside, people sipped drinks and spoke in low, confident tones. Deals were still being hinted at. Names still carried weight. And Marcus Reed was no longer part of any of it. Not even in the background. He had been moved again, further back, deeper into the building, past the kitchen, past the service corridor, to a narrow utility space near the freight elevator. The kind of place guests never saw. The kind of place that didn't exist in the version of the night that mattered. A stack of empty crates leaned against one wall. A flickering overhead light cast uneven shadows across the concrete floor. The hum of machinery vibrated faintly through the walls, low and constant. Marcus stood there holding a box of discarded glassware. No music reached this far. No laughter. Just the quiet rhythm of work that didn't get noticed. He set the box down and began sorting through the glasses, separating what could be reused from what had chipped or cracked. His hands moved with the same care as before, as if each piece still deserved attention, even here, even now. Footsteps approached behind him. Lina again. She slowed as she stepped into the space, taking in the dim lighting, the isolation. They moved you all the way back here? She asked, disbelief in her voice. Marcus didn't turn right away. Looks that way, he said. That's not even your station. Marcus picked up a glass, holding it to the light to check for flaws. Tonight it is. Lana crossed her arms, shaking her head. She's pushing you out, she said. You know that, right? Marcus placed the glass carefully into a separate crate. I know what it looks like, he replied. And you're still just letting it happen? He paused, then looked at her. What would you have me do? He asked. Stand up for yourself, Lena said immediately. Say something. Don't just let her decide you don't belong here. Marcus held her gaze for a moment. Then he gave a small, measured breath. I don't need her to decide where I belong, he said. But she already is, Lena insisted. Marcus didn't argue, because that part was true. Back in the lounge, Vanessa Cole adjusted her blazer and scanned the room with practiced precision. Everything was back under control. That's what mattered. The earlier incident had faded quickly, exactly as she expected it would. In places like this, people didn't dwell on discomfort. They moved past it. They rewrote it in their heads as something smaller, something unimportant. That's how these spaces stayed clean. She spotted a familiar group near the bar and walked toward them, her heels tapping a steady rhythm against the marble. Gentlemen, she greeted smoothly, her smile returning without effort. Everything going well? Perfect, one of them replied. Great atmosphere tonight. Vanessa nodded. That's what we aim for. Her eyes moved across the room again, instinctively checking for anything out of place, anything that didn't fit. Marcus was no longer visible. Good. Ethan Blake noticed that too. He hadn't taken his eyes off the service door for more than a few seconds at a time. When Marcus didn't return, something inside him tightened. He leaned forward, resting his elbows lightly on the table. Excuse me, he said to no one in particular, already standing. His companions barely acknowledged him. He moved through the lounge slowly, not drawing attention. Just another guest stretching his legs between conversations. But his path wasn't random. It led straight toward the back, toward the door. He paused just before reaching it, glancing once over his shoulder. Vanessa was across the room, engaged in conversation. No one was watching him. He pushed the door open. The shift in atmosphere hit him immediately. The warmth vanished. The noise dropped. What replaced it was real. Fluorescent lights, metal surfaces, the smell of cleaning agents and something faintly burnt from the kitchen beyond. Ethan stepped inside carefully, closing the door behind him. For a moment, he just stood there, adjusting to the difference. Then he heard movement further down the corridor. He followed it. Marcus didn't look up right away when he heard footsteps. He assumed it was another staff member. Stack those on the left, he said, still focused on the crate in front of him. The footsteps stopped. There was a pause. Then a voice, calm but unfamiliar, answered. I don't think I work here. Marcus turned. Ethan stood a few feet away, his suit out of place in the narrow, dimly lit space. For a second, neither of them spoke. Then Marcus straightened. Guests aren't supposed to be back here, he said. I figured, Ethan replied. But I had a feeling I'd find you. Marcus studied him. Not suspicious, not defensive, just assessing. Can I help you? Marcus asked. Ethan took a small step closer, lowering his voice slightly. I saw what happened out there, he said. Marcus didn't react. People see a lot of things, he replied. Not like that, Ethan said. Marcus held his gaze. What do you want? He asked. Ethan hesitated for a fraction of a second. Then his eyes dropped, briefly, to Marcus's hand, to the ring. Up close, there was no doubt now. The engraving wasn't decorative. It was intentional, recognizable. Ethan looked back up. That ring, he said quietly. Where'd you get it? Marcus didn't answer. The silence stretched just long enough. to make the question heavier than it sounded. Ethan exhaled slowly. "I've seen that mark before," he continued. "Not here. Not in places like this." Marcus's expression didn't change. "But you already knew that," he said. Ethan gave a small, almost reluctant nod. "Yeah," he admitted. "I did." Another pause. The hum of the building filled the space between them. Then Marcus spoke. "Then you also know," he said. "This isn't a conversation you want to be having back here." Ethan's lips pressed together briefly. "Maybe not," he said. "But I think it's one that matters." Marcus studied him for another moment. Then he reached for a glass, turning it slowly in his hand, inspecting it like before. "You should head back," he said. "Your table's waiting." Ethan didn't move. "And you?" he asked. Marcus placed the glass down. "I'm exactly where I need to be." The words landed differently now. Not defensive, not resigned, certain. Ethan nodded slowly. He didn't push further. Not yet. But as he turned to leave, one thought stayed with him, sharper than before. This man wasn't hiding. He was choosing, and whatever he was waiting for, it was coming, but not fast enough to break what had already settled over the room. When Ethan stepped back into the lounge, the contrast hit him harder than before. The warmth, the music, the glow of city lights, everything felt staged now, like a performance he could suddenly see through. He paused just inside the door. No one noticed. Or if they did, they chose not to. Vanessa's voice carried across the room again, smooth and confident, wrapping around conversations like nothing had happened. She laughed at something one of the investors said, her hand resting lightly on the edge of the table, her posture relaxed. Control. That's what she had. Control of the room. Control of perception. Control of what people chose to see. Ethan moved slowly back to his table, but he didn't sit down right away. He watched. Not just Vanessa, not just the guests, everyone. A server walked past with a tray of drinks, eyes down, movements careful. Another adjusted a chair slightly out of place, fixing something no one else had noticed. A bartender wiped the same spot on the counter twice, his focus somewhere else entirely. And beneath it all, silence. Not the absence of sound, but the absence of action. Ethan finally took his seat. His phone was still in his hand. The screen had gone dark. He tapped it once, bringing it back to life. The contact he had hovered over earlier stared back at him. He didn't press it. Not yet. Instead, he set the phone down on the table and reached for his glass, though he didn't drink. Across the room, Vanessa's eyes flicked briefly toward the service door, then away, satisfied. In the back, Marcus Reed moved from the storage area into the kitchen space. Heat replaced the cool air of the corridor. The sharp scent of garlic and oil hung in the air, mixing with the metallic clatter of pans and the low, constant murmur of staff working through the rush. A line cook shouted an order. Someone answered. Plates slid across counters with practiced speed. Marcus stepped into the rhythm without needing direction. He picked up a stack of trays and began wiping them down, his movements steady, controlled. The repetition didn't bother him. It never had. Work for Marcus was never just work. It was structure, and structure gave him space to think. Not about what had happened, but about what always happened. Different places, same patterns. He had learned that a long time ago. People didn't always show you who they were in big moments. Most of the time, they showed you in the small ones. The offhand comment, the look, the decision no one questioned. That's where the truth lived. Read. The voice came from behind him. Marcus turned. Vanessa stood at the edge of the kitchen, just inside the doorway, careful not to step too far in. The heat, the noise. It wasn't her space. Her eyes scanned him quickly. "You're not done yet?" she asked. "I'm working through the list," Marcus replied. She crossed her arms, unimpressed. "Well, work faster," she said. "We're not paying you to take your time back here." Marcus nodded once. Vanessa stepped closer, lowering her voice just enough to keep it between them. "You know," she said, "some people would have left by now." Marcus didn't respond. She tilted her head slightly. "But you're still here," she continued, "which tells me something." Marcus met her eyes. "And what's that?" he asked. "That you need this job more than you're willing to admit." The words were quiet, but sharp. Marcus held her gaze for a moment. Then he looked back down at the tray in his hands. "Everyone needs something," he said. Vanessa smirked. "Some more than others," she replied. She straightened, her expression shifting back into that polished version of herself. "Stay out of sight," she added. "We've got important people up there." Then she turned and walked out. Her heels faded quickly against the noise of the kitchen. Marcus continued wiping the tray. Same motion, same pace. But Lena, standing across the room, had heard enough. Her hands stilled on the counter in front of her. For a moment, she looked like she might say something. Then she didn't. Because everyone else didn't. A dishwasher kept scrubbing. A cook flipped something in a pan. Another server walked past, eyes forward, focused on anything but what had just happened. Silence. It spread fast. Marcus finished the tray and set it aside. He reached for another, as if nothing had changed. Back in the lounge, Ethan leaned back in his chair again. His attention shifted between the room and the door. He wasn't the only one who had noticed something was off. But he might be the only one willing to follow it. A man at the next table leaned over slightly. "Everything all right?" he asked casually. Ethan glanced at him. "Yeah," he said, "just thinking." The man nodded, uninterested, and turned back to his conversation. Thinking. That's what this room avoided. Ethan picked up his phone again. This time he didn't hesitate as long. His thumb hovered, then lowered. But before he could press the call, a sharp voice cut across the room. "Excuse me?" Heads turned. Near the center of the lounge, an older guest stood halfway out of her chair, looking unsettled. A glass of water had tipped slightly on the table, not spilled, but enough to draw attention. A nearby server froze, uncertain. Vanessa moved quickly, her smile already in place. "I'm so sorry," she said, stepping in smoothly. "Let me take care of that for you." The moment passed almost as quickly as it began. Control restored. But Ethan saw something in it. The hesitation, the uncertainty, the way the staff waited for direction instead of acting, the way no one stepped forward until they were told to. He leaned forward again, his mind settling into something clearer now. This wasn't just about one incident. It was a pattern, and patterns didn't fix themselves. His gaze drifted once more to the service door. Marcus was still back there, out of sight, exactly where Vanessa wanted him, exactly where everyone else was willing to leave him. Ethan picked up his phone again. This time his thumb didn't hesitate. It pressed. The line began to ring. Once, twice. He didn't look away from the door, because now he knew one thing for certain. The silence in this room. It wasn't going to hold much longer. Ethan Blake lowered his phone slowly after the second ring connected. He didn't say much, just a name, a location. A short pause, then, "You might want to see this for yourself." He ended the call before the other person could ask questions. Because whatever this was, it wasn't something you explained. It was something you witnessed. He set the phone face down on the table, his fingers lingering for a second before pulling away. Around him, the lounge continued its quiet performance. Glasses lifted, deals hinted, smiles traded. But now Ethan wasn't watching the room. He was watching the edges of it, the places people didn't look. In the kitchen, the rhythm tightened. Orders came faster now. Plates lined up along the pass. Steam rose in bursts as lids were lifted and slammed back down. Voices overlapped, sharper, more urgent. Marcus moved through it like he always had. Steady, unhurried, precise. He carried a stack of trays to the dish station, rinsing them one by one. Water ran over his hands, warm and constant. The motion was repetitive, almost meditative. But his eyes weren't distant. They were present, watching, learning. He had always paid attention to small things. The way people spoke when they thought no one important was listening. The way decisions got made without ever being said out loud. The way silence filled a space faster than sound. "Hey," Lana's voice came again, softer this time. Marcus glanced over his shoulder. She stood near the prep counter, her expression tense. "You feel that?" she asked. Marcus didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned off the water and reached for a towel, drying his hands slowly. "Feel what?" he asked. "Like something's about to happen," she said. "I don't know how to explain it, but I know," Marcus said quietly. She blinked. "You do?" He nodded once. Lena studied him, searching his face. "You're not surprised," she said. Marcus folded the towel neatly. "No," he replied. "Why?" He hesitated. Then he looked toward the hallway leading back to the lounge. "Because moments like this don't stay quiet forever," he said. Lena followed his gaze. "But what changes?" she asked. "People like her don't just get checked." Marcus's expression remained calm. "No," he said. "They don't." A pause. "Unless something makes them." Back in the lounge, Vanessa Cole was still moving from table to table, her energy sharp and controlled. But if someone had been watching closely, really closely, they might have noticed something small. A shift. Not in her smile, not in her posture, but in her eyes. They flicked towards the service door more often now. Not because she expected Marcus to come back, but because she didn't like unfinished things. She prided herself on control, on keeping everything exactly where it belonged. And Marcus, he didn't fit. She turned back to a guest, finishing a sentence with a soft laugh. "And that's why we maintain such a high standard here," she said. The guest nodded, impressed. Vanessa smiled, but her attention drifted again. Something in the room felt off. She couldn't name it, but she felt it. Ethan noticed that too, the way her focus slipped, the way her confidence, while still intact, wasn't as effortless as before. He leaned back, folding one arm across his chest, his other hand resting lightly on the table. His eyes moved from Vanessa to the service door, to the guests around him. He saw it now, the subtle tension, the way people glanced at each other a little longer than usual, the way conversations had a slight pause between sentences, like everyone was waiting for something they couldn't define. The silence wasn't broken yet, but it was cracking. A server passed by Ethan's table. "You need anything else, sir?" she asked. Ethan looked up at her. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated, caught off guard. "Emily," she said. Ethan nodded. "Emily," he repeated. "You been working here long?" "About a year," she replied. Ethan studied her for a moment. "You ever see something like that before?" he asked quietly. Emily's eyes flickered, just for a second. Then she looked down. "I just do my job," she said. Ethan didn't push. He nodded once. "Of course you do." She moved on quickly, but the answer had been enough. In the back, Marcus stepped into the corridor again, carrying a small stack of clean glassware. The hallway stretched ahead of him, dim and narrow. He walked slowly, his footsteps soft against the concrete. As he reached the corner, he paused. Not because he had to, because he chose to. For a moment he stood there listening. The distant music from the lounge filtered through the walls, the hum of the building, the faint echo of voices. He took a breath, then another. And when he stepped forward again, there was something different in the way he moved. Not faster, not louder, but clearer, like a man who had already decided something. Near the main entrance, a security guard shifted his weight slightly, adjusting his stance. His radio crackled softly. "Front desk to security," a voice came through. "Go ahead," the guard replied. A brief pause. Then, "Be advised, VIP arrival in 10 minutes. The guard straightened. "Copy that." He glanced toward the elevator, then back at the room. Everything still looked the same, but it didn't feel the same. Vanessa heard the radio too, her head turned slightly. "VIP?" she repeated under her breath. She checked her mental list. No one had mentioned an arrival. Not this late. Her jaw tightened just slightly. She walked quickly toward the front desk, her heels sharper now, more deliberate. "Who's coming in?" she asked the receptionist. The young woman looked up, slightly flustered. I'm not sure," she said. "They just said VIP." Vanessa's smile didn't return this time. "Well, find out," she said. Across the room, Ethan watched her reaction, and for the first time that night, he smiled, because now he knew, whatever was coming, it wasn't just important, it was going to be undeniable, and when it walked through that door, no one in that room was going to be able to pretend they didn't see it. The elevator doors at the far end of the lounge slid open with a quiet, polished chime. At first, no one reacted. That was the nature of rooms like this. Nothing drew attention unless it demanded it. But then the air shifted. Subtle, unmistakable. Two security officers stepped out first. Their presence calm but deliberate. Not aggressive, not loud, just certain. Their eyes scanned the room once, not in suspicion but in preparation. Behind them, a man stepped forward. Tall, composed, dressed in a navy suit that didn't need to announce its cost. The kind of presence that didn't chase attention, because it had never needed to. The music didn't stop, but it softened. Vanessa felt it before she fully saw it. That shift, that weight. She turned toward the elevator, her smile already forming, her posture adjusting instinctively. This was her world. High-value guests, unexpected arrivals, moments to impress. She stepped forward quickly, her heels precise, controlled. "Good evening," she began, her tone warm, confident. "Welcome to—" But she stopped mid-sentence, because the man didn't slow down, didn't look at her, didn't even acknowledge her. He walked past her like she wasn't there. Vanessa's hand hung in the air for half a second too long before she lowered it. her smile tightening just slightly. Confusion flickered in her eyes, quickly masked, but not completely gone. Behind her, conversations began to falter. People noticed now. Not the man himself at first, but the reaction, the absence of acknowledgement, the way the room subtly rearranged itself around him. Ethan Blake stood slowly. He didn't need confirmation. He already knew. The call had been answered, and now the answer had arrived. His eyes followed the man as he moved through the lounge, past tables of executives, past conversations that faded into silence as he passed. The security officers stayed back, giving space, not crowding, because they didn't need to. The room was already making way. Vanessa recovered quickly. She turned, stepping back into motion, trying to catch up. "Sir," she said, her voice still smooth, still practiced. "If there's anything you need," still nothing. No response, no glance. He kept walking, not aimlessly, not searching, directly, toward the service corridor. Vanessa stopped again. That wasn't right. VIP guests didn't walk themselves to the back. They didn't ignore management. They didn't bypass the front of the room. Unless her thoughts stalled, because she didn't have a category for this. In the kitchen, the rhythm broke. Not loudly, not suddenly, but enough. One of the line cooks slowed his movements. A dishwasher glanced toward the corridor. Even the hum of conversation dropped just slightly, like a collective breath being held without anyone realizing it. Marcus stood near the prep counter, a tray in his hands. He felt it. The shift. Not from sound, from presence. He didn't turn right away. Instead, he set the tray down carefully, aligning it with the edge of the counter. Then he looked up. The man stepped through the service doorway. The fluorescent lights hit him differently than the warm glow of the lounge. Sharper, more real. But his presence didn't diminish. If anything, it became clearer, more defined. Behind him, the faint echo of the lounge lingered. Ahead of him, the kitchen fell quiet. Marcus met his eyes. For a moment, the entire space held still. No one spoke. No one moved. Then the man took a step forward, and another, closing the distance without hesitation. Lina felt it before she understood it. She stepped back slightly, her eyes moving between Marcus and the man approaching him, her breath catching just enough to make her aware of it. This wasn't random. This wasn't coincidence. This was intentional. Back in the lounge, Vanessa moved quickly now, her composure starting to crack at the edges. She followed the path he had taken, her heels sharper, louder. "Excuse me," she said to no one in particular, pushing past a server who stepped aside instinctively. She reached the service door and paused just long enough to steady herself. Then she opened it. Ethan followed a few steps behind, not rushing, not interfering, just watching, because this was the moment. In the kitchen, the man stopped in front of Marcus. Up close, the difference between them disappeared. Not in appearance, in presence. Marcus stood straight, his hands at his sides. The man looked at him, not quickly, not dismissively, carefully, taking in every detail, the clean shirt, the faint crease where it had been changed, the quiet stillness. Then his gaze dropped briefly, to Marcus's hand, to the ring, and something shifted. Not surprise, recognition. Vanessa stepped into the doorway just as the moment stretched. "What is going on back here?" she demanded, her voice sharp, trying to reclaim control. Heads turned. The spell broke, just slightly, but not enough, because the man didn't look at her. He didn't turn. He didn't acknowledge her at all. His attention remained exactly where it had been from the moment he entered. On Marcus. And now, the entire room understood. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was something else entirely. And whatever it was about to change everything. No one in the kitchen moved. The clatter of dishes, the hiss of burners, the low hum of voices, all of it seemed to fall away, like someone had turned the volume of the world down just enough to notice the silence. The man stood in front of Marcus Reed, close enough now that there was no misunderstanding, no mistake, no coincidence. Marcus didn't speak, he didn't step back, he didn't bow his head. He simply stood there, meeting the man's gaze with the same calm he had carried all night. Across the room, Lina felt her chest tighten. She didn't know who the man was, but she knew what she was seeing. This wasn't a guest wandering into the wrong place. This was someone who belonged exactly where he had just walked. Vanessa stepped further into the kitchen, her voice cutting through the stillness. "I asked a question," she said, sharper now. "What is going on back here?" No one answered. Not the cooks, not the servers, not even the supervisors who suddenly found something very important to focus on that wasn't her. Because something had shifted, and they could feel it. Vanessa took another step forward, irritation rising in her chest. "Sir," she said, redirecting her tone, smoothing it out as she addressed the man. "This area is restricted. If you'd like, I can escort you back to the main—" She stopped. Not because she chose to, because he moved. Just slightly. Not toward her, toward Marcus. And in that small movement, her voice lost its place. The man's eyes never left Marcus. Up close, the resemblance was there, but subtle. Not in features, not in appearance, in presence, in stillness, in something that didn't need to be explained. Vanessa felt it now, that unease she couldn't name before. It crept up her spine, quiet but insistent. Something was wrong, or maybe something had been wrong all along. Back in the lounge, the absence of movement had become noticeable. Guests shifted in their seats, glancing toward the service door more openly now. Conversations had thinned, stretched into something fragile. Ethan Blake stood just inside the doorway, watching everything unfold. He didn't interrupt. He didn't speak. Because this wasn't his moment anymore. It belonged to them. In the kitchen, the man finally spoke, but not to Vanessa. "You've been busy," he said. His voice was calm, low, measured, not a question, a statement. Marcus allowed a faint breath to leave his chest. "You could say that," he replied. The words landed simply. But to everyone else in the room, they didn't make sense. Because people didn't speak to men like this so casually. They didn't respond without hesitation. They didn't stand there like equals. Vanessa blinked. Her eyes moved quickly between them, trying to catch up to something she didn't understand. "Excuse me," she said, stepping forwards again, forcing her voice back into control. "I don't know what's going on here, but I need to know who you are and why you're—" The man turned his head, just slightly, and for the first time he looked at her. The effect was immediate, not loud, not dramatic, but final. Vanessa's words stopped. Her breath caught, not visibly, not in a way she could explain, but enough that she felt it. She had spent years reading people, assessing them, measuring their importance in seconds. And in that one glance, she knew. This wasn't someone she could manage. This wasn't someone she could talk over. This wasn't someone she could dismiss. Her posture shifted, just barely. "What is your name?" she asked, softer now. The man held her gaze for a moment longer. Then he turned back to Marcus, as if the question didn't matter, as if she didn't. The silence that followed was heavier than anything that had come before. Lena's fingers curled slightly at her sides. She had never seen Vanessa lose control of a moment. Not once, until now. And it wasn't even loud. It wasn't a confrontation. It was something quieter, more complete. Like the room had decided, all at once, that Vanessa's authority didn't reach this far anymore. Marcus shifted his weight slightly. Not nervously, just enough to ease the stillness. "You didn't have to come," he said. The words were simple, but they broke something open. Because now, everyone heard it. The familiarity, the tone, the absence of distance. The man's expression softened. Just a fraction. "I think I did," he replied. A pause. Then his eyes moved again, taking in the room, the staff, the tension, the silence, and finally, Marcus. "You should have told me you were coming," he added. The words hung in the air. Clear, unmistakable. Across the room, something inside Lena snapped into place. Her eyes widened. Vanessa didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't understand. Not yet. But she felt it. That moment. The one where everything starts to fall into place. The one right before the truth lands and changes everything. Ethan exhaled slowly. There it was, the first crack. Not in the room, in the story. And he knew, whatever came next, no one was walking out of this the same. The silence stretched. It wasn't empty anymore. It was full. Full of questions no one dared to ask. Full of realizations that hadn't quite formed yet. Full of something heavier than confusion. Something closer to truth. Vanessa Cole stood frozen in the middle of it. Her eyes moved between the two men again, searching for something that would make sense of what she had just heard. "You should have told me you were coming." That wasn't how staff spoke to guests. That wasn't how anyone spoke to someone who walked into a room and made it shift without trying. Her voice came out tighter this time. "I'm sorry," she said, forcing a polite tone back into place. "But I still need to understand what's happening here." No one answered her. Not the man, not Marcus, not anyone. Because the answer was already there. It just hadn't been said out loud yet. The man took a slow breath. Then he did something small. But in that room, it changed everything. He reached out and placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. Not formally, not cautiously, familiar, steady, like it belonged there. Marcus didn't flinch, didn't step away. He didn't look surprised. He didn't look uncomfortable. He just stood there, as if this moment had been expected all along. Vanessa felt it hit her before her mind could catch up. That connection, that ease, that absence of distance, her chest tightened. "That's not," she began. But the words didn't finish, because the man finally spoke again. "My name is Carlton Reed." The room didn't react right away. Names meant nothing on their own. Not here. Not without context. But Ethan Blake closed his eyes for half a second, because he knew exactly what that name meant. Carlton Reed, chairman. The man who didn't attend events like this unless something mattered. The man whose decisions moved quietly but reached everywhere. The man who... Ethan opened his eyes again and looked at Marcus. Vanessa's smile flickered, then returned, then broke again. "Of course," she said quickly, nodding as if catching up. "Mr. Reed, welcome. If we had known you were arriving, we would have prepared." Carlton didn't look at her, didn't acknowledge the explanation. His hand remained on Marcus's shoulder for one more second. Then he stepped slightly to the side. Not away, just enough to look at him more clearly. "You've been here all night?" Carlton asked. Marcus gave a small nod. "Since before the doors opened." Carlton's gaze moved over him again, taking in everything, the clean shirt that had been changed, the faint tension still sitting in his shoulders, the calm that hadn't broken. Then his voice dropped, just enough that the words felt heavier. "What happened?" The question was simple, but it landed like something much larger. Marcus didn't answer right away. He didn't rush to explain, didn't point, didn't accuse. Instead, he let the silence sit. And that silence, it told more than words could. Vanessa stepped forward again, urgency creeping into her voice. "There's been a misunderstanding," she said quickly. "One of the staff, he spilled." Carlton turned his head and looked at her, fully. For the first time, the effect was immediate. Vanessa's words stopped, her throat tightened, because this wasn't the glance from before. This wasn't dismissal, this was assessment. And she felt it, measured, weighed, found lacking. Carlton didn't raise his voice, didn't change his posture, but the space around him shifted again. "You're the manager?" he asked. Vanessa swallowed. "Yes," she said. "Vanessa Cole, regional events." Carlton nodded once, then turned back to Marcus. "What happened?" he repeated. "This time," Marcus answered. "A drink got spilled," he said. Vanessa exhaled slightly, relief flickering in her chest. But it didn't last. Carlton's eyes didn't leave Marcus. "And?" he asked. Marcus paused, just long enough. Then, "It wasn't an accident." The words didn't echo. They didn't need to. They landed exactly where they were supposed to. Across the room, Lena felt her breath catch. Someone near the kitchen door shifted their weight. A cook looked down. A server stopped mid-step. The silence cracked. Not loudly, but completely. Vanessa shook her head quickly. "That's not—" "He's exaggerating," she said. "It was a misunderstanding, I can explain." Carlton raised a hand. Not toward her. Just enough. And she stopped. Again. Because now, she understood. This wasn't a conversation she controlled. This wasn't a situation she could manage. This was something else entirely. Carlton looked at Marcus again. Then, slowly, his gaze dropped. To Marcus's hand. To the ring. The same ring Ethan had noticed. The same ring that had been there the entire time. The same ring no one else had paid attention to. Carlton let out a quiet breath. Then he smiled. Not wide, not performative. Just real. "You kept it on," he said. Marcus glanced down at his hand, then back up. "Always do." Carlton nodded once. And in that moment, the final piece fell into place. Ethan stepped forward slightly, just enough to see more clearly. Because now, he knew what was coming, and once it was said, there would be no going back. Carlton turned slightly, not away from Marcus, but toward the room, toward the people who had watched, toward the silence that had allowed everything to happen. Then he spoke, clear, measured, unmistakable. "This is Marcus Reed," he said. A pause, long enough for the name to settle. Then, "He's not staff." The words hit like a shift in gravity. Vanessa blinked. Her mind rejected it instantly. "That's not possible," she said. He's on the schedule, I've seen." Carlton didn't look at her. He didn't need to, because he wasn't finished. He's the reason this place exists. The room stopped breathing. Every eye turned. Every thought aligned. And in that moment, Marcus Reed was no longer invisible. Carlton's voice didn't rise, but it carried. He built this, he said simply, before any of us were standing in it. The weight of that sentence settled slowly, then all at once. Vanessa took a step back. Her heel caught slightly on the tile. She steadied herself, but the balance was already gone. Because now, everything she had done, everything she had said, had a different meaning, a different consequence, a different cost. Marcus stood where he had been all along, calm, still, unchanged. But the room around him, it had finally caught up, and nothing in it would ever feel the same again. The kitchen didn't move. Not a single sound broke through the moment. It was as if the entire building had paused, caught between what it had been just minutes ago and what it had suddenly become. Vanessa Cole stood frozen, her breath shallow, her mind scrambling to rebuild a version of reality that no longer existed. This doesn't make sense, she said, her voice thinner now, stripped of its earlier confidence. There has to be some mistake. He's been working here. I've seen him. He's on the schedule. Carlton Reed didn't look at her, because he didn't need to. There's no mistake, he said calmly. The certainty in his voice didn't rise, but it settled, and it stayed. Vanessa's eyes darted to Marcus again, really looking this time, not at the uniform, not at the role she had assigned him, at the man. And suddenly, things she had dismissed earlier came back, clearer now, the way he stood, the way he spoke, the way he didn't react. It hadn't been weakness. It had been restraint. And that realization hit harder than anything else. Across the kitchen, someone set a plate down too quickly. The sound echoed louder than it should have. A cook glanced at another. A server lowered her eyes. The silence wasn't protecting Vanessa anymore. It was exposing her. Ethan Blake stepped fully into the kitchen now. He didn't rush, didn't interrupt. But his presence was no longer passive. He stood just behind Carlton, his expression composed, but his eyes sharp, watching every reaction, every shift, every crack forming in the room. Because this was what truth looked like when it surfaced. Not loud, not dramatic, but impossible to ignore. Vanessa tried again. Her voice steadied just enough to sound controlled. If there was a misunderstanding, she said, I'm sure we can address it properly. We take professionalism very seriously here. Carlton turned his head slightly. Not fully, just enough. And it was enough to stop her again. You poured a drink on him, he said. No accusation, no raised tone, just fact. Vanessa opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. It wasn't, she started. It wasn't meant to be taken that way. It was just what? The question came from Marcus. For the first time. His voice wasn't louder, but it was different, clearer, not defensive, not emotional, honest. Vanessa looked at him, and for a moment, she didn't recognize the position she was in, because for the first time, she wasn't the one defining the moment. She was inside it, answering for it. I was managing the room, she said, her words slower now, chosen carefully. Sometimes things get misinterpreted. Marcus held her gaze. Was it misinterpreted? He asked. The question didn't leave space to hide. Vanessa hesitated, and that hesitation said everything. Carlton's eyes moved across the room. He saw it now. Not just what had happened, but what had been allowed to happen. The staff who had stayed quiet. The structure that had made silence easier than speaking. The pattern. And patterns didn't belong to one person. They belonged to systems. He took a breath, then spoke. Who else saw it? No one answered. Not immediately, because the room had been trained not to. Marcus didn't look away. Neither did Carlton. And slowly, something shifted. A server near the back stepped forward slightly. I did, she said. Her voice shook, but she didn't stop. She poured it on him, on purpose. Another voice followed. A cook this time. I saw it too. Then another. And another. The silence broke. Not in a rush, but in pieces. Each one small. Each one necessary. Vanessa shook her head quickly. This is ridiculous, she said. You're all misunderstanding the situation. I've been running this place for years. My record speaks for itself. Your record is exactly what we'll be reviewing, Carlton said. That stopped her, completely. Because now, there was no version of this where she walked away unchanged. Marcus stepped forward slightly. Not to confront, not to dominate. Just enough to stand fully in the space that had been denied to him all night. I didn't say anything, he said. The room quieted again. I didn't stop it. I didn't call it out. His voice stayed calm, measured, but everyone saw it. He looked around the room, not accusing, not angry, just present. And nobody said anything. The words landed heavier than anything before, because they weren't about Vanessa. They were about everyone. Lena felt her chest tighten. Ethan didn't move. Carlton's expression didn't change, but the weight of the moment deepened. Marcus continued. That's how it works, he said. Not just here, everywhere. A pause. People don't step in, not because they don't know it's wrong. His eyes moved slowly across the room. They just don't think it's their place. No one spoke, because they knew it was true. Carlton nodded once, then turned to the security officer standing near the door. Escort Ms. Cole out, he said. Vanessa's head snapped up. Wait! No, you can't just, she began, her voice rising again. But it didn't carry the same authority anymore. Not even close. This isn't over, she said quickly. You can't just remove me without a formal review, without… It's already begun, Carlton replied. The officer stepped forward. Not aggressively, but firmly. Vanessa looked around the room, looking for support, for someone to step in, to say something, to stop it. But no one moved. Not one person. Because now, the silence had changed sides. Her shoulders stiffened, her jaw tightened. And for a moment, it looked like she might argue further. Then she didn't. Because she finally understood. This wasn't a room she controlled anymore. She turned and walked toward the door, her steps uneven for the first time that night. The officer followed. The door closed behind them. And just like that, she was gone. The kitchen stood still, not because they had to, but because they didn't know what came next. Carlton turned back to Marcus. You okay? He asked quietly. Marcus nodded once. I've been through worse, he said. Carlton studied him, then gave a small nod. I know, he replied. A pause, then, but you shouldn't have to. Marcus didn't answer, because that part wasn't new. Ethan stepped forward slightly. Things are going to change after this, he said. Carlton looked at him. They already have, he replied. The room slowly began to move again. Not like before, not as if nothing had happened, but differently, more aware, more careful, because now they had seen it, and they couldn't unsee it. Marcus stood where he had been all along. Same man, same calm, but now seen, recognized, and no longer alone in the silence, because the silence had finally been broken. But what followed wasn't noise. It wasn't chaos. It was something slower, heavier, the kind of quiet that comes after truth has been spoken out loud, when people are no longer deciding whether to see something, but what to do now that they have. The kitchen moved again, but not the same way. Every motion felt more deliberate, more aware. Conversations didn't resume right away. When they did, they stayed low, careful, almost respectful. Marcus Reed stood near the prep counter, his hands resting lightly against the surface. For the first time all night, no one looked past him. No one avoided his presence. They looked at him, really looked, and that felt different. Not empowering, not satisfying, just honest. Carlton Reed remained beside him, his posture steady, his presence still commanding without effort. But now there was something else there too. Not authority, connection. You didn't have to stay, Carlton said quietly. Marcus gave a small breath of a laugh, barely there. I wanted to, he replied. Carlton studied him. Still? He asked. Marcus glanced around the room. The staff, the space, the system that had just revealed itself in full. Especially now, he said. Carlton nodded slowly. He understood. Ethan Blake stepped closer, not interrupting, but no longer staying at the edge. You built this place, he said, more as a confirmation than a question. Marcus met his gaze. A version of it, he said. Ethan's eyes moved around the room again. And this, he asked, is this what you had in mind? Marcus didn't answer right away. He took a breath, then spoke. No, he said, a pause. But it's what happens when you stop paying attention. The words weren't defensive. They weren't excuses. They were responsibility. Lena stood a few feet away, still holding the towel she had forgotten to put down. She looked at Marcus differently now. Not just with concern, with understanding. You came back here on purpose, she said. Marcus glanced at her. Yes. To see this? To feel it, he corrected. The room went quiet again, because that changed everything. This hadn't been an accident. This hadn't been circumstance. This had been a choice. Carlton let out a slow breath. You could have told me, he said. Marcus gave a small nod. I know. Then why didn't you? Marcus's gaze dropped briefly to his hand, to the ring, then back up. Because I needed to know, he said. Know what? What it looks like. When no one thinks you matter. The words settled deep. No one in the room could look away now. Carlton turned slightly, taking in the staff again. They'll remember tonight, he said. Marcus nodded. I hope so. A supervisor stepped forward hesitantly. What happens now? He asked. It was a simple question, but it carried everything. Carlton looked at Marcus, not as a formality, as a decision. Marcus straightened slightly, not commanding, not forceful, just clear. We fix it, he said. The words were simple, but they held weight. How? The supervisor asked. Marcus's eyes moved across the room again. You start by listening, he said, to the people you don't usually hear. A pause. Then you make sure they don't have to wait for something like this to be seen. Ethan nodded slowly. That's going to cost people their positions, he said. Marcus didn't look away. Then they shouldn't have been in them. No anger, no hesitation. Just truth. Lana swallowed. What about the rest of us? She asked quietly. Marcus turned to her. You keep doing your job, he said. But you don't stay quiet when something's wrong. Her fingers tightened around the towel. I didn't say anything, she admitted. Marcus nodded. Now you will. It wasn't blame. It was permission. The room shifted again. Not from fear, from clarity. Because now, everyone knew where they stood. Carlton checked his watch briefly, then looked back at Marcus. We'll handle the rest in the morning, he said. Marcus nodded. I know. Carlton hesitated for a second, then reached out again, this time briefly gripping Marcus's shoulder. Pride, respect, something unspoken but understood. Then he stepped back. The space opened again. Ethan glanced toward the door. So this is it? He asked. Marcus looked at him. For tonight, he said. Ethan nodded. That's enough. One by one, the room began to settle into something new. Not the old rhythm, something better, slower, more aware, more human. Marcus picked up a clean glass from the counter. He held it up to their light, checking for flaws, the same way he had all night, the same care, the same attention. But now, someone noticed, then another, then more. Not because he had changed, because they had. Lena finally set the towel down. You going back out there? She asked. Marcus looked toward the hallway leading to the lounge. The music still played. The city still glowed beyond the glass. But it didn't feel the same anymore. He gave a small nod. Yeah, he said. Why? Marcus allowed a faint smile. Because this place still belongs to the people in it, he said. Then he stepped forward. Not as a server, not as someone invisible, but as a man who had always been exactly where he needed to be. The door to the lounge opened. The golden light spilled in again. And this time, when Marcus walked through it, no one looked past him. Across the room, eyes lifted. Conversations paused. Not out of discomfort, out of awareness, respect, something earned, something restored. And somewhere in that quiet shift, something deeper settled in, not just for the people in that room, but for anyone who had ever been overlooked, ever been dismissed, ever been told, without words, that they didn't belong. Because now, the truth stood where it could be seen, clear, unavoidable, and impossible to forget. Value was never about the role you were given. It was about who you were when no one thought you mattered. And sometimes, the most powerful people in the room are the ones no one thinks to look at, until it's too late. When Marcus Reed walked back into that golden-lit lounge, after being humiliated, erased, and pushed into the shadows, and people finally looked at him, that was the moment everything changed. Because dignity doesn't come from where you stand in a room. It comes from how you carry yourself when everyone else decides you don't matter. Next time you see someone being overlooked, don't wait for a moment like Marcus had. Just acknowledge them. One look, one word, one small act. Sometimes that's all it takes to remind someone they're not invisible. Have you ever stayed silent in a moment like that and wished you hadn't? Tell me below. And if this story made you feel something real, there's another one waiting for you right after this.